Well, good morning, JumpStarters, and welcome to another week of JumpStart Worship. I'm so excited because today we're going to talk about a really cool story that we find in Matthew chapter 8 about Jesus and his disciples on a boat ride. Now, this was a little bit different of a boat ride, and they ran into something pretty scary on this day, but we're going to see exactly how Jesus showed his disciples that they could have faith in him. Now, before we get into that, I have really enjoyed worshiping along with you guys on Sunday mornings, and so I want to encourage you guys to continue to do that. Now, I know that it may feel a little strange dancing in your living room or singing in your living room with no one else around, but I want to encourage you guys to continue to do that and continue to participate as we sing and worship and tell God how great He is and thank Him for all that He's done in our lives.
Spoke one word and the dark became light. I believe it, yeah. You spoke my name and my heart came to life. I believe it, yeah. I wanna sing about it, I wanna scream and shout it. I'm gonna sing it right now. At the top of my lungs I sing. With all of my heart I will praise you. God, you are by my side. I believe it, yeah. I wanna sing about it, I wanna scream and shout it. I wanna sing it right now. At the top of my lungs I sing. With all of my heart I will praise you. God, you are everything. You're the reason that I lift my voice. At the top of my lungs I sing. With all of my top of my lungs. Yeah, at the top of my lungs. Oh, at the top of my lungs. I'm gonna scream it, oh, I'm gonna shout it. I'm gonna sing it out. At the top of my lungs. I'm gonna scream it, oh, I'm gonna shout it. I'm gonna sing it right now. At the top of my lungs I'll sing. With all of my heart I will praise you. God, you are everything. You're the reason that I lift my voice. At the top of my lungs I'll sing. With all of my heart I will praise you. God, you are everything. You're the reason that I lift my voice. At the top of my lungs I'll sing. With all of my heart I will praise you. God, you are everything. You're the reason that I lift my voice. At the top of my lungs. At the top of my lungs. Yeah, at the top of my lungs.
This morning, I want you to go ahead and grab your Bibles and open it to Matthew chapter 8. Now, in Matthew chapter 8, we're going to find a story where Jesus has been teaching and doing miracles and healing people outside of this town. And while they're there, Jesus and his disciples, they make a decision. They say, you know what? We're going to get in this boat and we're going to go across the Sea of Galilee to the other side so that we can kind of get away from these crowds for a few moments, so that we can have a moment to ourselves. So Jesus and his disciples, they pile into a boat. In verse 23, it says, as Jesus and his disciples got into the boat, the disciples followed him. And they push out from shore and they head off across the Sea of Galilee. Now, as they're sailing, something begins to happen. The Bible tells us in verse 24, it says, suddenly a violent storm arose on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. Now, we all know a thing or two about storms. We've lived through storms. We've been around storms. Even randomly, sometimes on afternoons, it'll just start raining. And I mean, it feels like, we are getting all of the water, all of the rain in the world poured on us at one time. We know about storms. It rains here a lot. And I'm sure that there have been times where you've been sitting in your house, you've been at school, you've been wherever it might be in one of these thunderstorms, in one of these rainstorms where you're looking out and there is just water piling up and it doesn't look like there is any end in sight to the storm. Maybe the wind is blowing and you can hear it howling around your house. Maybe some of you may have pets or animals, and your animals are hunkered down in a corner because they're afraid of the storm and they won't go outside. And it just makes for a crazy time when it storms really bad. Well, the disciples had a reaction that we have a lot of times when storms like this come up. They begin to be very afraid. They're out in the middle of this lake. They're trying to get to the other side, and the storm is rocking their boat, and it's raining, and the wind is blowing, and they are beginning to think to themselves, how are we going to make it to the other side of this lake? But verse 24, it doesn't just say that there was a violent storm that arose and it was throwing the boat back and forth. It also says something really interesting at the end. It says, suddenly a violent storm arose on the sea so that the boat was being swamped by waves, but Jesus kept sleeping. Now, I'm sure that you guys have had this experience too, where there's been a storm going on and maybe it pops up in the middle of the night and you're all in on this storm. You know that it's there. It woke you up out of your sleep. You're a little bit nervous or a little bit scared, and maybe you run to your parents' room or you run to your older siblings' room or something like that, and you find them sound asleep. And the thought that runs through your brain is, how in the world could you sleep through something like this? Well, the disciples have the same thought. And so the disciples, they try and they do everything that they can in Matthew chapter 8 to make it through this storm. But they finally get to a point where they can't do anything else. And so it says the disciples came and they woke Jesus up saying, Lord, save us. We are going to die. The disciples were in a desperate situation. They knew that their only hope was Jesus, and they woke him up, and Jesus says to them, he says, why are you afraid, O you of little faith? The Bible tells us that then Jesus stands up and he rebukes, or he speaks to the winds and the sea, and that there was a great calm immediately. See, what's interesting about this story is Jesus uses this as a moment to teach his disciples something. See, the disciples, when they were in the boat and everything was cool and everything was good, they were okay with Jesus being asleep. They were okay with Jesus being at the back of the boat and handling things on their own. But then when things got out of control, they immediately forgot about the power that Jesus had. They forgot about all the incredible things that they had seen Jesus do. And they began to panic and they began to say, oh my goodness, how are we going to fix this situation? How are we going to survive? And Jesus reminds the disciples in this moment, he says, hey, no matter the situation, no matter what's going on, no matter how crazy of a storm, no matter how bad it looks, you can put your faith in me. He calls them out and he says, why are you afraid, you of little faith? And then he speaks to the storm and it stops. Jesus showed his disciples in this moment, you can put your faith in me because I have power even over something like a storm. Even over something as crazy as a rainstorm and wind and terror out on the sea. He said, I am bigger and more powerful than that, so you can have faith in me. The disciples realized something in this moment because verse 27 tells us that the disciples, that they were amazed and they asked each other, "What kind of man is this that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Now in our lives today, as we read this passage, I think it helps us understand a little bit more about having faith in God, about putting our faith in Jesus. We've talked about faith before. We understand what it means. We understand that faith is that it's equal to, that it's kind of like we believe in something, or we say we're going to follow and we really trust and we believe in who Jesus is. It's called putting our faith in Him. And I think what we can see in the story as we begin to look at it, we see that in our lives there are going to be a lot of times where we go through a lot of different things. Some of them are going to make us feel like the disciples felt in this moment, where they were afraid. They didn't know what the answer was. They had no idea how they were going to make it through. But Jesus reminded His disciples. He said, "Oh, you of little faith, don't worry, I've got this." And He spoke to the storm and boom, it stopped. Such a great reminder for us today that no matter what we're going through, no matter what's going on around us, no matter how crazy it seems, no matter how afraid it may make us, we can always run to Jesus. We can always go to God and know that we can put our faith in Him because no matter what it is, He's bigger than it. No matter what it is, He's more powerful than it. The disciples were amazed. They looked and said, "What kind of person is this who can control, who even the wind and the waves listen to Him?" And Jesus showed them something in that moment. Jesus showed them that He wasn't just a regular person, but that He was God with them. And the Bible teaches us and shows us very clearly that for us, that we can put our faith in Jesus. We can commit to follow Him and say, "God, no matter what the situation, we're going to put our faith in You because we know that You're with us and that You are bigger and more powerful than anything that we're going to face."